Thanks for participating in this project.
Thanks for
and with away from Voivod, drummer and the guy with the concept overall, right?
Yeah.
So I wanna start from the very beginning. Like the band formed in '82, right?
Sort of. Piggy, Snake, and I got Piggy, Blackie, and I. Yeah, so we got together in November '82, but we found Snake in January '83. So officially consider Voivod as being born in January '83.
So that's the real birth of the true Voivod.
I think so, yeah. Before that, we didn't think about a name or anything like that. So it's when Snake joined that we really focused on trying to make it professionally. You know?
Perfect. Yeah. So by '83, you had your first gig, and then released it as a live tape, right?
Yes.
This was mostly covers, right?
Oh yeah, we only had 2 songs original, maybe, or 3. I think we probably played the song "Condemned to the Gallows." I remember that we played Voivod at the start and at the beginning. At the end,
perfect.
Yeah.
So twice in the same set.
Twice in the same set, and after the set, Snake yelled, "We're Voivod, don't forget it," or something like that, in French, like in real slang, like only Voivod retenez-les. It's like people from France wouldn't know what we're saying.
Only for Canadians.
Yeah, but that show in '83, summer of '83, all the bikers in town were there, and my grandmother.
So that was a highly attended gig.
Yes.
How was the scene in Jonquière, the city, right?
Yes, but there were only 2 bands, Death Dealer and Voivod. Death Dealer were more Iron Maiden. Or
yeah, the heavy metal one.
Yeah.
I know that. There's 2 albums. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So they were like 2 bands, but it's just that we knew everybody because it's a small town, and so everybody came, our parents, and then all of our friends, everybody from school, and so the place was packed. Now there is a plaque celebrating Voivod at the same spot. Yeah, super cool. Yeah.
So a few months before, after this, you released your first proper demo, right? To the Death.
Yeah.
This is a live rehearsal, right?
The what?
A live rehearsal, right? Recorded on the.
Yeah, because in January '84 we had a show to do still in our hometown, Jonquière, and we decided to rehearse the show and record it as a demo with Snake, with all the interventions, like it was a real show.
Yeah.
And we played all the songs back to back like we were playing live, and that's the demo that we sent to everybody. Eventually got a deal with Metal Blade.
So, a little bit before getting into the Metal Blade thing, regarding this first period of influence with the band, would you consider there was a variety of influence between the different members? I remember reading on an old interview on a fanzine that, for example, Piggy wasn't into punk and hardcore, while at the same time you and Snake were, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, Piggy liked a couple of punk bands, but the ones that he thought was very well played, like the Stranglers, and stuff like that. But Snake and I are really into the Pistols, the Damned, and a little after that hardcore, But Piggy was much more into progressive rock than we were.
Since the very beginning.
Yes, I mean, we all connected with the new wave of British heavy metal. That when that music came out, first Iron Maiden album, Ace of Space by Motorhead, and then British Steel, Judas Priest, that's really where we were all like 16, 17, and we thought it's a new decade, it's all music, new generation, and so in our roots are really heavy metal. But since we loved punk and prog rock so much, we kind of blended. It was not really conscious at all. It's actually when we started touring with Celtic Frost and Creator in the mid-80s that we realized that we were a bit different. But before that, we didn't know.
So, by May '84, you recorded. By May '84, "Condemned to the Gallows"
Yeah.
was released. That's your first proper recording, right?
Yeah.
A studio recording.
Yeah, it wasn't not necessarily proper in the sense that we only had one day, one afternoon, so I had to use a very tiny drum kit that they had, and the guys from the studio were only used to do jingles for radio.
Okay.
So we showed up with the Marshall amps and all that, they freaked out, and they asked us to buy. Tom Scholes from Boston. He had the band Boston,
Boston, the big
Scholes.
band.
Yeah. He had a thing called Rockman that it was like a bunch of transistors, because he's a genius, that guy, and so you could have the same sound of your amp, with the big distortion, but the volume that you wanted. So it kind of sounds weird, but we had to use it for War and Pain too, because we recorded in the same studio.
Which studio is that? Where was that?
It was in northern Quebec, where we grew up, we did Condemned to the Gallows for Metal Massacre 5. The reaction was great, so Metal Blade contacted us to do a full album. So for War and Pain, we had like 3 days or something. We borrowed, every one of us borrowed $500 from Snake's mom, and we did War and Pain. We paid her back years later.
How did this deal with Metal Blade came to be regarding featured on the new Metal Massacre back then, and this new War of Pain album? And how was the reception of this new, of your first album back then?
We had a friend, Wayne Archibald, and he was a pen pal to everybody on Earth. He was sending cassettes, he was getting demos from Raven, and demos from Metallica with Dave Mustaine and stuff like that, and he sent our the To The Death demo to everybody, and eventually Brian Siegel heard the demo, and he said, "Oh, I'd like you to record a song for Metal Massacre 5," and the people loved it. And then when War and Pain came out, after that, the full album, it was really the right moment, right time, right place, because there was a new movement that was going to become thrash metal. It was exploding worldwide, and even though we were a bit different, we fit right in.
Yeah, perfect. So, did you play much by the release of War and Pain? Did you tour Canada, anything?
Not at all. We toured, we did shows in the province of Quebec.
Okay.
We only started touring professionally worldwide when we released War in '86. So for a couple of years we only played in the province of Quebec.
So what about the World War III festival? Can you tell us a little bit more about this now legendary gig with how did it came to be? Because you drew the artwork as well.
Oh yeah. We also I was a curator of I picked the bands that were going to play and all that, and except for Nasty Savage, they were our management choice. But but they ended up being great, and when we decided to move to Montreal in '85. And to have a better structure, find a proper management, and but when we moved to Montreal, we only had $150 a day from welfare, each of us, Yeah. So these were tough times. And then we had started writing Roar, and I started recording it, and then we. In Montreal, but we got part of our gear stolen from our rehearsal space, so we were really stuck. We couldn't mix the album, Roar. We were missing some gear, so we decided to organize this World War II festival and invite Destruction, Possess, Celtic Frost, Nasty Savage, and we headlined the show, and many people showed up, and so which allowed us to mix the album and buy new gear. And we gave a rough mix to Martin Ain from Celtic Frost, and he brought it to Noise Records in Berlin.
And there you got signed.
Yeah, we got signed for 3 albums, and that's where we got the financial support to go on the road.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we first tour in USA in '86 was with Celtic Frost. went across Europe with Possess in '86, did a world tour with Creator in '87. These were demented tours with riots and anyway.
Yeah, were you the headliners on that World War III festival?
Yes, yeah. We organized the whole thing and we were headlining it. Yeah.
And by that time, you already had most of Raw written, right?
Yes, it was actually the album was recorded, but we couldn't finish, we couldn't mix it because we had no money, and so we had no deal. We only had a one album deal with Metal Blade, so we were without a deal, and so it's Martin Ain really that saved us because all of a sudden we. Well, first of all, the World War III festival paid for the mix of the album, which was great, and then we got the deal and were able to release it on Noise Records, and then record Killing Technology and Dimension Atlas in Berlin, and then we started doing one album and one world tour every year, so it was great times.
Busy times.
Oh yeah, yeah. But we were living together, rehearsing every day, so that's how we could achieve it. Yeah.
So, considering you released pretty much a demo for almost every album you had on the Iron Gang, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you have any problems with the labels regarding the releasing of the demo previous to the album, and how did exactly the Iron Gang work?
Well, it was mainly live shows that we sold on cassette through the Iron Gang. We actually released the demos after
the album itself.
Yeah. And 4 reissues and special editions, and but the Iron Gang was mainly they were mainly live shows that we recorded from the soundboard.
Yeah. So, before the '86 tour, you played your first US gig with Venom and Chromax.
Yeah.
How did that went?
Amazing. I mean, it was before, just a little bit before the crossover happened between hardcore and metal. So there were a lot of, while we were playing, there were many fights between skinheads, metal dudes, and the security of the Ritz in New York. I remember that. It was pretty eventful, but the guys from Venom were super nice. Became friends with the guys from Chromax, which I liked anyway. And so first show, it was very memorable, as a first show.
As a first show
in USA.
Yes.
It was, but it was tough to cross the border. When they saw us, the thrash metal look, it was new. It was
still something new back then.
Oh yes, yeah.
So right after this, you embarked, as you said before, on this huge American and European tour, right?
Yeah.
Did you choose the bands that you were playing with? Did you choose to play with Celtic Frost and Running Wild in the US, and with Possessed and Death Row in Europe?
Well, we actually for the Celtic Frost and Running Wild tour, we were. It was a suggestion from Noise because all 3 bands were on Noise. Yeah. It was easy for us, for them, to put all 3 bands in one bus and everything. So for the Possessed tour, we were just we were just very good friends with them since the World War III festival, and we were still in touch with Debbie Burnham.
The manager, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we got in touch with her, and we asked her, is it possible to tour Europe with Possess? And we were all excited because, back then everybody was like 20 years old, and so it was really exciting to go around the planet, visit all these countries and cities, we still. I still meet these people, and I still share stages at festivals, like let's say with our old friends, Exodus, Testament, Sepultura, Creator, Possess, and still today like 40 years later, it's great.
It's still going strong.
Yeah. Testament invited us to go across Europe. They invited us in Tokyo, and Exodus as well invited us in Tokyo. So it's amazing. And these bands are more popular than ever too. So, yeah.
Now, regarding this European tour, I read something that happened in Bochum.
Yeah,
Like,
I will always remember.
Can you tell a little bit of that story of the riot in Bochum?
Well, first of all, the scene in Bochum is very strong. Instead of yelling Voivod, Voivod, they were yelling Bochum, Bochum, Bochum. So it's like, and but the security people had no idea what a mosh pit was or a stage dive, so they kind of freaked out and started beating up the kids. But the whole crowd turned against them, so they ran for their lives. And so the crowd jumped on stage and destroyed all the gear. And then some kind of
your gear?
Yeah, we were sharing gear with Possess.
Shit.
And so everything was destroyed. And at first, like we played and everything was fine. We were like. It was a co-headlining bill, so we were switching every night. And that night, Possess were ending the night. So we played, everything's cool, but we saw that the security people are beating up the kids, we were freaking out. So we go backstage after the show, Possess start, and then we hear this big commotion, and then we see the security people running down the hallway for their lives, and a bunch of kids running after them. So we went to the stage and everything is destroyed. And then some kind of militia came with dogs, and so I grabbed my stuff and I went out by the back of the club, and then there was a policeman with a dog there, and the dog started barking at me, and he started yelling in German, like I understood that he wanted me to go out the front door. So I went out the front door, and when I came out, there was a row of like punk metal kids and a row of policemen. Every policeman had a dog. The dog was like sitting, and the kids were spinning at the policeman, and the dogs were just waiting the order for the police. And anyway, I had to go in between to the tour bus.
A super tense moment.
Oh yeah, I will always remember that. And when we played Bochum in '87, the year after, with Creator, we since Voivod was playing again in their club, all the security people had baseball bats, and they were waiting for the kids. So I told Millie, like, man, these guys are gonna beat up the kids with baseball bat. So Millie and I went to the promoter, and we said we're not playing if these guys are on stage. And and our manager was really pissed off because the promoter, because of the insurance, he had to have security, and so the show was almost cancelled. But the guys from Creator, they phoned a bunch of friends, they came and did the security, and everything was fine. They were just pushing the people back when they were crowd surfing, that's the way.
That's the way, that's the thing, yeah. So between the American and the European tour, you did the No Speed Limit festival that was later released as a tape. I have it over there, but I didn't check it out. So this was also you as headliners, right? Was it as big as the World War III festival?
Oh, it was 2 nights downtown Montreal at a very beautiful club called the Spectrum. I used to go to the Spectrum. I used to hitchhike from Jonquière up north to the Spectrum to see Iron Maiden, Killer School, No Sleep Till Hammersmith by Motorhead, Girls School, and so in this beautiful club. So we booked 2 nights with Possessed, DRI, Agnostic Front, Nicolás Ramirez, maybe I can't recall. A whole bunch of bands. Was very, very successful. Yeah.
Cool. So by '87, you released the Kill Technology, right?
Yeah.
This brought forth a change in what Voivod was doing, like musically wise. It made it more complex, right?
Yeah, I mean, Piggy started when he was 9, so he was a bit ahead, you know. So when we joined the band, we barely could play at all. Blackie and I, and Snake had never sang before, Warren Payne, and so we asked Snake in '83, early '83, to audition, and I asked him, "Can you sing?" He said, "I never tried, but I'd like to try." And I said, "Okay, just learn The Ripper by Judas Priest," and he sang it like Johnny Rotten. It was amazing. So we were always a step behind Piggy, but we were like touring and rehearsing so much. We were really learning how to play. I think at Dimension Atros is where I was satisfied with my recording and my playing. You know, by Killing Technology, it's half in between the energy of the youth that we had and more mature way of seeing things.
Yeah, definitely. It's like the step up between Roar and Dimension Atros.
Exactly.
So, considering you were touring so much, when were these songs composed?
Oh man, we didn't waste any time, and like I said, I would say that between '83 and '89 we rehearsed pretty much every night, and so we lived together in the big in downtown Montreal in a big loft on top of a striptease bar, so we could make demos and all that. Yeah. So we were working every day on the concept, the art, the music, and everything was really connected together and moving this full speed ahead, you know. So we tested a lot of the songs on the road. The problem we ran into is when we got the deal with Noise, Roar was rhythm, you know, but they said you're gonna go across USA with Celtic Frost for Roar in '86, and then across Europe with Possess, and at the end of the tour you can come to Berlin to record the next album. So we had to write Killing Technology before going on tour for Roar, and then but we tested the songs on the road.
Oh, you played them on the tour.
And then we got to Berlin pretty ready, but when we got back from recording Killing Technology, it came out, and then we got this world tour with Creator. The same deal. The tour ended. We started in the USA, ended in Europe, and then we had to go to Berlin to record Dimension Atros, but we had to write it before touring for Killing Technology.
And again, trying the songs while on tour.
Yeah.
So, how was the reception of this? Both Killing Technology and Dimension Atros, considering they're so different from what was before. How was the reception of the public? I mean, Voivod style changes a lot throughout the years.
Yeah, already. I mean, when we did the Roar tour with Celtic Frost and Possess, everything was fine because it was so thrash metal. We only did the first 2 albums plus some songs from Killing Technology. But anyway, when we toured Killing Technology with Creator, is really where I noticed people scratching their heads a little. We were turning into something more proggy, and people didn't know how to deal with that. Snake had a French accent, and at first we were kind of afraid of the accent, but then we realized that Creator, Sepultura, everybody had an accent. You know? It was even hard to communicate in English between us because everybody was learning how to speak English.
Everything on the way, on the go. Yeah. Did you choose to play with Creator on the tour?
Well,
or is it a Noise thing again?
It's a Noise thing. They were on Noise, but I must say that when we were offered a world tour with Creator, we were pretty excited, and we had the best of times with them on the road worldwide. I really remember it fondly, and they became super close friends. We toured again with them in 2010, and we play with them at festivals all the time, and all of these people are really, really good friends, which is great.
Right after, as you said, you already composed before touring, and then finishing the tour, then you enter to record Dimension Atros. But this again, it's a little bit even further into prog.
Oh yeah. Dimension Atros, at this point we really knew how to play, and it's done without a click track. Even Nothing Face is done without a click track, and it's pretty tight, you know. We just played so much that at one point, if Piggy was writing something really intricate, at least we could play it, you know.
You can understand it and play the answer to that.
Yeah.
Before going to Nothing Face, I wanted to ask you about Mauro Liberatore.
Oh yeah.
He's your luthier, right? The one that did the guitars and the basses and everything?
At first, when we were living up north, Piggy was building his guitars with his father. He worked in a wood shop, and it was a big wooden counter in a bar, you know, for his first guitar.
Yeah.
He asked me to do a basic drawing, so I did something pointy, and he rearranged it so all the pickups would fit and everything. But when we moved to Montreal, he found this really great luthier, Mauro Liberator. So that's where Blackie got his bass done, and he did many guitars. A double neck guitar,
Double neck? Do you use a double neck with Voivod?
Piggy did, yeah. Yeah. He had a beautiful double neck guitar. If I remember well, it was a 12 strings and a 6 strings, if I remember well. Yeah.
Did he use that in any song?
Yes, and live, but I couldn't say which one though.
Okay.
It's long ago. It was eventually stolen, and last year somebody sent me a photo saying, "I have Piggy's guitar if you want it," and it's a double neck, but somebody cut all the spikes. It looked really ugly. I told the guy, "I forget it. It's been butchered. I don't want it."
Exactly. So up until when did you work with him?
It was in maybe until Dimension Atros. Maybe I don't think we used these guitars for the Nothing Face tour. Maybe we did. I would say the 80s. Yeah, from
late 80s.
Yeah. I would say from 86 to 89, maybe. Yeah.
So again, after this, you toured with Violence, right? On this Dimension Atros tour?
Yeah.
And then you recorded Nothing Face, which goes into something completely different, right? Getting away from thrashier kind of stuff and going full prog.
I was still doing some double kick action, but the label was complaining that I was doing too much double kick drums. They said if you put less kick drums, you will lose the thrash metal side, and that's what we want. I was pretty disappointed. That's why on Angel Rat I didn't put as much.
This album, Nothing Face, was your first album recorded digitally, right?
Yes.
How was this change of era from recording an analog tape to recording digital?
It was actually it was still on tapes, but it was a digital process. I can't really explain it because I'm not savvy enough, but in that domain. But it was recorded, mixed, and mastered digitally. So it might have been the first album done this way. It was very, very, very new. We recorded at Victor Studio, which is Victor Studio is where Bing Crosby and everybody on the RCA Victor recorded there at a very old recording studio with wooden walls. It's beautiful, and the studio, the acoustic was amazing, the gear was amazing, and the producer Glenn Robinson, he rented the slide called Neves. They have that at the road, and it's very expensive, recording gear. And so he went all out, you know. It was a major deal on MCA, so yeah, we had to do it properly.
Was this album recorded live? Do you usually record it live back then? Live, drums, bass, and guitars at the same time?
Yeah. I know that Snake did some overdubs, but we usually played a bunch of takes and played it 4 or 5 times, and by the 4th or 5th take, it was usually good enough to do some punch in and out, or punching in and out, or Snake could do overdub on top of that. But the first 5 albums were, even Rat was pretty much done like that. We would do like 4 or 5 takes, and by the time we do 5 takes, it's like, okay, that's the one we're gonna work on. You know?
It's enough. That's the one.
Yeah,
the perfect one.
Yeah.
Perfect. I've read in many early interviews of the band that you had pretty much a concept for each album.
Yeah.
Right. What was the concept for Nothing Face, and how did the concept evolve from War and Pain until Nothing Face?
I first created the concept in the 70s when I discovered Heavy Metal magazine. I wanted to be an artist for Heavy Metal magazine, so I was a big fan of Moebius, Philippe Drouillet, Bilal, and so at first it was mainly for comics, the Voivod, Vampire. First it was a bit Dungeons and Dragons, but with the Cold War and all that, it turned into a post-apocalyptic concept. And so when we Snake joined the band in '83, we're looking for a name, and I mentioned Voivod. The guys asked me how to spell it, and then they said, "What is it?" And I explained the concept, and so they were really excited about it, and we decided to develop it all through the '80s. And so Snake and I had a great time sitting down, figuring where the Voivod was going to go next. And we, on the road, we read a lot of magazines, scientific magazines like Discover, Omni, and we picked a lot of ideas from that. But there were also events that happened that really influenced us. Let's say like the Chernobyl accident, Challenger explosion, Star Wars project from Reagan, acid rain, you know, like so we were throwing everything inside, and so you know, from the Voivod being some kind of nuclear vampire warrior to going full-on mechanical on war, going into space for killing technology, going into a micro galaxy on Dimension Catras, finally going into inside his brain for Nothing Face. It was really fun. The thing is, in the early 90s, Snake felt like he was trapped in a box. He wanted to talk about other stuff. Okay. So starting with Rat, we put the concept aside. We brought him back as a trio for Phobos.
So for this album, you recorded Astronomy Domini.
Yeah,
right. Astronomy Domini by Pink Floyd. Why? Why a Pink Floyd song, and why a Pink Floyd song from the Syd Barrett era? Were you fans of the Barrett era?
Oh yeah, the 4 of us were big fans of Syd Barrett and the early Pink Floyd, and we wanted to do Astronomy Domini, but Piggy was a major fan of David Gilmour, so we did the version that's on Umaguma, the live version. We cut a bit of the organ solo, and then but it's the live version that we copied, and it actually had to be approved by David Gilmour, and he made sure that the royalties went to Syd Barrett. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So Gilmour listened to it?
Yeah.
And he approved it?
Yeah.
Cool.
We were really happy.
So but by this time, which changed the sound and changed pretty much a little bit of everything with the band, you even changed the bands you toured with. Like this time you toured with Soundgarden and Faith No More. Was that your choice?
Yeah. When we had a new management for the Nothing Face period, and when he asked me, do you have any idea which bands we should be touring with? And I said Soundgarden and Faith No More, and they said yes. I was really happy. The thing is, they were not known at all. I knew them. A friend of mine was a radio DJ at Concordia University in Montreal, and he got me into the new music. And so I discovered Faith No More and Soundgarden. And the thing is, both bands exploded while we were touring. By the time we hit the Midwest, there were way too many people coming at the shows, which is a great thing, you know. Yeah. And but out of respect, they kept opening for us, like the 2 bands. Yeah.
They were on the same label?
No.
Not even that?
No. Actually, one of the every major label wanted his alternative metal band. So A&M had Soundgarden, Warner had Fit No More, so MCA signed us, yeah. So Columbia signed Soul Asylum, and so they were not really metal, but everybody wanted the alternative,
This new thing.
yeah.
So by the end of this tour, you played with Rush, right? You played a few
Yeah.
days with Rush. So how was that? Did you ever expect to play with Rush back when you were beginning?
We were scared because I had seen people opening for Rush getting booed off the stage in Montreal, and so I was afraid. But mainly when we played in Toronto, their hometown, you know, I was afraid that people would react badly. But when we played Astronomie Dominée, the crowd was louder than our music, so it was a really great experience.
Really great then. Were you a Rush fan?
Yeah, we were all Rush fans. Yeah. And when we did the first show, there was backstage a note from signed by all three members of the band with a bottle of champagne and a vinyl of Presto, I think it was. So we gave the vinyl and the note to Piggy. Piggy was like worshipping Alex Lifeson. So yeah,
Really great.
And we met them, but we were pretty silent because we were too intimidated. Yeah.
So the year after this, you released Angel, right? This again is a new sound, even a more alternative kind of 90s sound, right?
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
were them both musical, lyrical, and conceptual? Let me phrase that again. So were the influences both artistically and musically changed for this new album?
Well, the tour with Soundgarden and Fit No More, we could see the wind turning, the crowd was moving differently. Instead of crashing, they were like waving, and so this had a kind of a strong influence on us. And when we came back, we wrote more of an alternative album, but it was not, we didn't sit down thinking we're gonna write an alternative album. But it just happened that we were influenced by the new movement, you know, and then of course by the time we released Angel Rat, the grunge was full on and it was sort of ignored.
How was the reception to Angel Rat?
Not that great, and people didn't get it. And again, everybody's eyes were turned on Seattle, and so. It was mainly about, I remember we were rehearsing downtown Montreal in a building where there were like 3 or 4 floors of bands rehearsing. And everybody was playing Smell Like Teen Spirit or Enter Sandman by Metallica, all at the same time, you know, it was like soundtrack from hell. So.
So was this artwork on Angel Rat a collage, a digital, analog artwork?
Oh, I did the first 4 album covers with acrylic paintings, but since I study science, it would take months, and so I decided to switch to digital during the Dimension Across period. And that's where I did some stuff for the videos, Travel Conviction, Psychic Vacuum with Commodore Amiga. And I also did the cover of Nothing Face and the booklet with an Amiga. And I did the same thing for Angel Rat. I used the Amiga, but by this time I knew how to use, let's say, a film that I like on the VHS, yeah? And I put on pause, and then I extracted the image on the drive, and I isolated elements. So for Angel Rat, the spider comes from The Incredible Shrinking Man, and there's a character from Klaatu from the Did the Earth Stood Still. So yeah, that's what I did. I used the VHS tape and I extracted characters from the movies. The caravan is from Fellini, La Strada, and so on. So I turned to digital in around 88.
So Nothing Face is already digital?
Yes, it's all digital.
All digital.
Yeah, it started with sketches, but I redid it with the mouse. I drew. I had to redo it with drawing with a mouse.
So this album was produced by Terry Brown.
Yeah,
it was Rush, right?
It was the Rush connection.
Were you aiming for him? Were you looking for him to produce?
Yes, because of the tour with Rush, and we wanted to record with him, you know, and he said yes. We were pretty happy. Yeah.
So, before releasing the tape itself, the Angel Ride itself, you released. There was a sampler release with different remixes.
Oh, we hated that.
Why? Why wasn't that released?
Actually, we went to the MCA mechanic studio in New York, and the guy who had signed us, he said, "Oh, I did a remix of a few songs with keyboards and back vocals, and I sent it to." He said, and then he played it to us, and we didn't like it at all. And we said, "You can't release that. It doesn't even sound like Voivod." He said, "It's too late." I sent it to all the cottage radio stations. And we were so mad. Snake stood up. His chair went flying, and we had to keep him from beating up the owner of the label.
So it wasn't good for you. You didn't like it at all.
We hated it. Yeah.
So now, since you didn't play live on Angel Ride, right?
Yeah.
Did the way you compose the songs change when you composed and did the Outer Limits?
Well, I mean, we wrote the Outer Limits Snake PDNI first of all because Blackie had left after during Angel.
Yeah.
And also I did all the drums for Outer Limits with electronic pads. I sampled my drum kit, but I played all the tracks on electronic pads and recorded with Cubase on the computer. And then I showed up in LA at Music Grinder with 2 ADAT tapes with the drums, and the guys built on it. But we had demoed it with programmed drums. Okay. Yeah. A lot of the drums I programmed myself, and Piggy did some of the demos just playing live on his beatbox. It was hilarious.
Did you always work like that, like a drum machine? Or
no, just starting with Outer Limits.
Perfect. So, for this album, you recorded another Pink Floyd song, the Nile song, which is kind of an obscure song from an obscure album.
Yeah.
Why? Just the fanatism of Pink Floyd?
We love Pink Floyd, but I mean, at this point, the label, the producer, or management were asking us to do another Pink Floyd cover, so we decided to do Nile song, but it's not really as efficient as London.
So we're kind of finishing.
Okay.
Thanks. So, who is Kisti Matsuo?
She's the one radio DJ that was studying creative writing at Concordia University that got me into the alternative music.
Cool.
And she was helping Snake because the major label wanted proper English. She was helping Snake to anglicize his lyrics.
Yeah.
So a good friend. Yeah.
So she was involved in the lyrical process of Angel Ride, Angel Ride Outer Limits, and nothing else.
Yeah, but she came at the end of the process when the lyrics were done. She was like, okay, this is wrong. And
so she didn't wrote the lyrics, but she rearranged them.
Yeah, but she also helped. She was there when Snake was trying to figure out a bit, but we already had templates for the songs when she came in. You know. Yeah.
So, just today, I learned that there's a '94 demo tape with a Piggy playing like an hour and a half on a drum machine.
Yeah.
So, if that was already done, why the change of style to Megatron, doing something so completely different?
Well, it was a brand new lineup with Eric, more like back to the hardcore route. We felt like we had gone as far as we could with the psychedelia, with Outer Limits, and it was time for us to go back to a more trashy sound. And Eric was more of the Fear Factory, Meshuggah, Sepultura school, and so he brought that to the band.
So, yeah, one last question to finish, since let's just invade the outer limits. Is it true that why did it took such a long time to being reissued? Is it true that the original masters were burnt down in the fire?
It's obscure. I know that they do have. I think the masters that were burnt in the fire were backups, and the reissues are done from the real masters from NCA.
So that's pretty much all the time we have. So okay, thanks a lot for participating. Thank you for taking the time to answering so much shit, man. There's so much.